Well, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Dads on the Fly podcast. I am Caleb Simmons alongside my brother Joshua. Joshua, how's it going, man?
Caleb, man, doing great. Let's talk about a couple things before we get into this week's episode. And one of them is, man, what a cool week. We had our first week on YouTube. And if you're watching this on YouTube, it's going to be just our intro today on YouTube. This episode we actually recorded before we knew we were going to do the YouTube thing. So you'll just have audio on YouTube this week. But we had a great response. I think we did a great thing of having our wives on the first YouTube episode.
Yeah, it was a lot of fun, and I'm glad they were able to do it with us and be a part of it. And yeah, I'm excited. We're on YouTube now, and being able to do video, I think it's really neat, and maybe getting another opportunity to get the Dads on the Fly message out there.
For sure, man. Then another exciting thing that happened to us this week was our good friend, Mr. Tom Rosenbauer, dropped the episode that I was fortunate enough to do with him about Dads on the Fly. And that was pretty cool.
That was really cool, man. You did a great job. I was really pleased with how you presented Dads on the Fly to the Orvis community and the people that listen to the Orvis Fly Fishing Podcast with Mr. Rosenbauer. Really great interview, I think, that you were able to do with him.
Yeah, thanks for allowing me to do that, man. I know we thought we were going to like paper, rock, scissors, or arm wrestle for it. But eventually we just kind of settled on, I got the opportunity to do it, and I really appreciate it. It was a great time just talking to Tom Rosenbauer, and he does so much for our community of fly anglers, and big props to that show, and I hope it'll just do a great job letting everybody understand what we're about here at Dads on the Fly. And as we continue to build this, just excited about where it's going to go.
Yeah, man, it's really great to see it continuing to grow, and still can't believe where it's at this point, but really thankful for all the people who are out there listening and sharing the love and sharing the stories and sharing it with people that you know that might find it entertaining and interesting.
Yeah, we appreciate all you guys that have reached out, even in the last couple of weeks, about Dads on the Fly. We're just excited to see what happens. We got to hopefully get on the water soon so we can actually be dads on the fly, because we're just dads at the house lately. We haven't got to do much fishing, but that's coming. But super excited about our episodes we've got coming up for the next really 2 or 3 months. Some really good people that we've already talked to got lined up on the schedule, and so it's excited from all walks of the fly fishing community that we're going to get to talk to. So other than that, man, I think we're ready to get this episode rolling.
Well, before we do that, I do want to tell folks, if they want to get a little bit more heads up on who's coming up on shows, so maybe they want to ask certain questions about certain things. We got a rod building series we're excited to talk about in the next couple months. And if you want to get your questions in to folks that maybe build rods, or we're going to be doing some interviews with some people who are kind of experts in blue lining in the Great Smoky Mountains National Park. If you want to get your questions in and you want to be updated on what's coming up for Dads on the Fly, go check out the Patreon. You can go to patreon.com, search Dads on the Fly, and you'll get some more updates from us that are a little bit more insider, and you get kind of the early stuff that the rest of the folks don't get.
I still got to get to cutting the outtakes for YouTube episode 1. I think I'm going to probably try to work on that this week, cutting those outtakes. It's pretty entertaining. The other thing I want to tell everybody is, if you haven't yet, go check out our webpage, and you can subscribe to our email. Yeah. And that's really cool. You did a great job putting together an email about our future shows, some future things that are coming out. And we have a couple, before we get into this episode, last thing I want to mention is a couple of exciting events. Number one is on March the 4th. I will be. You're actually not going to make that trip, but I'm actually going to take our dad.
Yeah.
So we'll have Dads on the Fly, and we're going to be down at Orvis in Greenville again, hanging out with Matthew and the fly fishing community down there. So excited for that. It's going to be middle of the day. They're doing like a 101 fly tying class that morning, a 201, I think, fly tying class that afternoon, and we're going to be kind of jam-packed in the middle. So I'm excited to meet everybody down there. If nothing else, come by, swing by Orvis that day and hang out, meet us. Just talk about fishing and everything that got going on there. And number two, which we haven't even posted this yet, so we'll just give it to the listeners first.
I love it.
If you're local to the area, we are going to have our first live recording.
I like it. I'm excited. It's going to be great.
It may be like our first real episode. Maybe who knows what's going to happen. But we're planning to do this at the Maggie Valley Fly Shop on March the 16th. That's a Thursday evening. And come by, hang out. We got some more news we're not going to release yet. We're working on this week. Pay attention to the social media channels for some announcements. I think it's going to be an awesome night. We're going to interview Mr. Jerry Yates. And, we think it's a great opportunity for us to sit down and talk to Jerry about all of his fly fishing adventures and frogs fanny floated. And through that, we're going to just get to hopefully meet some of you guys, come out and hang out. We're going to hopefully have some stickers and some other stuff to hang out and give away that night. So that's going to be pretty cool.
really excited about that. Lots of great things going on, and just really excited for all that's happening with this community that we've kind of been able to grow, and so really excited about those events. Well, let's dive into today's episode, Joshua. Today's episode is really special. We got a chance to interview the founder and CEO of Zoe Angling Group. We found him through the company called Fairflies, and that's a group we've seen some stuff on social media, and I think you listened to a podcast that Jeff was on, and you were like, man, we got to get this guy on. And when we learned more about his story, I was just blown away.
Yeah, it was a real shocking, in a good way.
Yeah.
Like, we were just kind of blown away where Jeff's story has taken him and took him, and all the things he's kind of ups and downs of his life, and to show his his steadfastness. Is that a word?
Yeah, I like it.
That's just what I kind of got out of this episode. So I'm excited for our listeners to be able to hear it.
Yeah, we do want to let our listeners know. Jeff does talk about some sensitive issues in this episode. There's some talk about because of what he does and the things that they do at Zoe Angling Group and through Fairflies. There's some talk about sex trafficking and things like that. So if you're listening to this, you got younger listeners around. Just a heads up for that, parents. If you're listening to this with your kids around, just know that it's coming. But really excited for everyone to hear our conversations. So let's dive right in to our talk with Mr. Jeff Coffey. Well, hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Dads on the Fly podcast. I am Caleb, joined alongside by my brother and another special guest that we're going to get to here in just a minute. Joshua, let's hear about our special guest tonight.
Well, you know me, finding these people in the fly fishing community. I don't like to say industry anymore. I like to say community. But our guest tonight, I heard about what they were doing, I think through another podcast, and then did some research. And, what was just really touched by what they're able to do with the products they're creating. So tonight we have with us Mr. Jeff Coffey.
Yeah, welcome to the podcast, Jeff. Jeff, thanks for joining us.
Thanks, guys, for having me.
Yeah, man. So Jeff is the founder and CEO of Zoe Angling Group, or ZAG, and it consists of several different companies. And Jeff, I know we're going to get into all of that here in just a minute, but we were very intrigued by your story and the creation of all of these amazing products and all these great things for fly tying, and then also what you're kind of doing behind the scenes with your company too is what really made us want to reach out to you and just learn a little bit more about your story. And so one of the things that we love to do, though, is we love to hear your introduction. We ask everybody on this when they come on our show, we'd love to get your introduction into fishing, and it's specifically into fly fishing.
Specifically. Well, I'm gonna go back. My first fish I ever caught was on a Snoopy rod in my neighbor's strip cedar canoe, and it was a striper in the Napa River out of San Francisco Bay.
Wow, a striper on a Snoopy rod.
A striper on it was 38 inches. And
how long did it take you to get that thing in on a Snoopy rod?
Man, like time just seems like that thing towed me around in that canoe for a good 45 minutes. I mean, I tired out way before the fish did. But we got that thing in, and that was my first. I was in the third grade. Fast forward to 17 years old, I get my hands on an old Penn fiberglass fly rod, and I decide I'm going back out. And with a big white woolly bugger, I get another striper. This time in the 40 plus range, on a Penn fiberglass. And again, just so I've got this close relationship with stripers. I really like them. But that was my first, and then it was just gangbusters from there. By the time I was 27, I was guiding on the Deschutes with Deschutes River Outfitters, and I've had my guide license since '94.
So you've been a fly fishing guide, an avid angler for since that time, since those beginning days of the stripers on the fly. And how did it transform into you owning these companies that now do more for the fly fishing industry?
Yeah. So, we tried to buy the fly shop that I worked at, and it didn't. The numbers just didn't work. We didn't, have the cash to dump into it. We just kind of wanted to move into a functioning company, and it didn't work. So I spent a few years guiding on the side and starting software companies. And we hit this point in life, like sometimes life just throws some resets at you. This reset was the doctor saying my wife wasn't going to be here in 3 days. There was no hope. Go home, get your affairs in order. And she was really sick. And she has Crohn's disease, and it had taken out most of her large intestine and literally almost killed her.
Wow.
Next day, literally died twice in the operating table, and just kind of through that, and she's still here with us, so we're grateful for that, miraculously. But it kind of hit reset. I couldn't be the CEO of a software startup anymore and take care of my family. My wife's now long-term recovery. And I walked out on a software company that probably would have definitely, not probably, I would have retired from. We were in negotiation with Sony and Walt Disney to buy us.
Wow.
And so, we thought this is it. And 6 months later, I find myself like fully Chapter 7 bankrupt. Like everything gone. Drift boat in the driveway, fancy house in Bend, Oregon, gone. And we looked at each other and said, hey, listen, if we're starting over, because we're clearly starting over, what are we going to do? And my wife looked at me and she says, listen, I don't want to know you as an employee, and let's find something. And so we kind of came up as a family with like 3 values. And the 3 values were: 1, something that we could do together as a family; 2, something I was passionate about. Like, if you're going to get up every morning and you're going to go start something, you got to put on the coat. Like, looking back, every time I put on the proverbial, coat as a software, startup guy, kind of felt like a fraud. Like, it just wasn't who I was. I could do it, and I was good at it, but it wasn't who I was. If we're going to do this again, let's do something that like fits. And then the third was something that had more of an eternal value to it. Like, sometimes you're just always chasing the next contract, the next deal, the next investment, for what? Like, at the end of the day, you spend a lot of time doing those things instead of spending it with your family. And when you come into those moments when that can all get ripped away from you, you start to reevaluate that. So that was the beginning of the journey, believe it or not. It wasn't like the end. It was the beginning of the journey. And so, I went to start a fly shop in the Portland, Oregon area, a little town called Milwaukee on the Willamette River. And we went to go buy the flies for the shop. And the distributor looked at me and he says, no, you don't buy them from me here. Meet me over in Thailand. We'll put you up. We'll show you a good time. What do you like, little boys or little girls? I mean, proposition me right there.
Wow.
And I was so enraged, right? Like, I was enraged. I was going to either throat punch the guy or get out. And on the way home, I called my wife and I said, we're out. We're out on the fly shop. We're not doing it. I can't move forward knowing that that's what we're selling for products. Instead, I want to find a way. I already knew the name. It was Fair Flies. That's how we started. I want to be the first fair trade certified company in the fishing industry. And we are. Wow. Still today, the only fair trade certified company globally in the fishing industry. So that was the start. That was like our origin, if you would. I mean, we started with like $200 in the bank. I walked out on the shop and I said, we're going to figure this out. I called a buddy that raised his family outside of Nairobi, Kenya, and said, who do you have for contacts? And it was just drinking from the fire hydrant ever since.
We have kind of blown away. Didn't know where that was going to go, but wow, what a story. And so through your buddy in Kenya, so it started as Fair Flies, and Fair Flies was making what at that time?
Originally the goal was, hey, how about instead of exploiting people for our sport, like, especially us as fly anglers, right? Like, it's part of our identity. It's mine, right? Like, I'm part of that. Like you said, community. It's identity as well. And I don't want to see that anymore. I don't want that to be part of what we are selling or purchasing. So how about instead of exploiting people, we find those that have been exploited. And through this industry, we can find a way to pay double a living wage, which, by the way, in most places is $15 a day, right? Like, how hard can it be, instead of paying $2 or $3 a day to a fly tire, who then has to do nighttime work just to feed their family? We pay, at least at a minimum, a living wage. So we started out saying, hey, who's doing it? And honestly spent a lot of time, couldn't find it. So then we decided we needed to start building tying groups. And I mean, bit off way more than we could chew when we first started. Like off into the deep end. I'm in Kibera, Kenya, second largest slum in the world, highest concentration of AIDS, like abductions every day. I mean, it's a rough spot. And started there learning. What do we do? I mean, I knew how to tie. I've been, when I was guiding, full time, I was working a shop boy in the morning, guiding the afternoon, and tying flies at night just to make ends meet. Sitting in the living room with the fam and tying flies. So I got fast. And then I started like making my own tools. Like, hey, I could do a new technique if I made a new tool, not knowing where that would end up. But so yeah, it's don't know if I answered your question there or not, but
no, I think you did, because I think the thing I heard from an episode with you on another show, our good friend over at the Wet Fly Swing, Dave, you had mentioned in that episode, this has been some time ago, that you are helping to provide, you are helping to get people out of tough situations, really rough situations, human trafficking situations, and you're providing income for them. And that's what drew me to Fair Flies to first check it out. And what kind of got our conversation started was, wow, what a cool thing that you're about. You're about giving back to others, and that really touched me. And so I think you've continued to do that as you have acquired more and more companies, correct?
Yeah. Yeah. So our goal is to create 10,000 jobs. As we grew in our learning, we ended up in Nepal, and huge trafficking issues going on there. I've heard numbers as high as 50,000 young girls working in brothels every night. So for a country the size of the state of Tennessee, that's a lot. It's a lot, period. But like, just given that geographic region. And the problem, around the world is, once you have that stigma, you've been a sex worker, nobody will hire you. And so those that even get rescued, they get taken out to safe homes 18 months later, they got to land on their feet somehow, and nobody will hire them. So 92% of the women that get rescued end up going back to the red light districts because there's no options, right? Like, without work, none of us can pay rent or buy food. And so that really just kind of opened up our eyes to, like, hey, we got to create jobs. I don't care what it takes. And we can't just compete. I can't go buy $10 million worth of flies so that I can compete with the big guys right there in the industry that are filling all of our bins in shops across the country. We have to innovate. We're talking a little bit earlier about our brushes. Like, that was a huge innovation. It's something different than anything else that's out there. And so we would describe ourselves today first as an innovation company in the industry. We've won most every award in the industry for our products. And then second, we don't do the production. We don't own these teams. We go and we work with people that are saying, hey, we're here. We want to help in the situation. We don't know what to do. We don't have jobs. We don't know how to create them. We work out with our products how to manufacture those products. We go over, we completely tool and outfit and train. I usually stay for a couple of months, and then I'm back every other month to work with them. And we teach them how to do each product that we're doing. And then we do the sales and distribution. So that comes back, and then right now, I think our products are hitting something like 45 countries now that we've sold to, and created about 200 jobs along the way.
That's incredible. Would love to hear you speak a little bit, Jeff. So we definitely want to get into those products, because we are fly tie. I mean, you're sitting here looking at our fly tie and stuff behind us. Like, we want to talk about some of those things. But before we dive into the really cool, innovative products that you guys have come up with, I'd love to hear a little bit more. So I mean, I guess you kind of explained it, but what does that look like for you all to find these groups to go in and be able to help them? It's incredible work. I think it is very much, I'm sure it's got to be rewarding. I'm sure it has got to be just incredible to see that take place. I mean, you're not just talking about creating a job; you're really changing a community, changing people's lives, kind of all over the world. So, what does that look like for you? How do you get hooked up with these different groups, and then how do you? I know you said you go over and spend some time with them. I mean, it sounds like you're basically setting up an entire like industry right there in that small community.
Yeah, well, at one point we sold as a family, we sold everything we owned and moved to Kathmandu.
Wow.
Craziest city on the planet. Like I love Kathmandu. I love Nepal. I love the people in Nepal. But for an American family to just like uproot, sight unseen, get on a plane with one-way tickets and go land in Kathmandu, it's a little crazy. Wouldn't recommend it to too many people, but I wouldn't trade it for my girls, getting to go there. What we learned early on is we needed boots on the ground influence there, right? That nobody local was getting a little greedy and taking more off the top and not passing up through payroll. Having a Western influence, like in the shop, that eye, right? Like Americans have an eye for quality, where Asians are, often it's like that should be good enough. And here it isn't, and we're competing against much larger companies. Ours has to be top notch. Our story doesn't get to have us sell crap. We got to, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah,
like,
I get exactly what you're saying.
we got to sell good stuff, because at the end of the day, guys are buying stuff, gals are buying stuff because it catches more fish. It's more efficient or effective at whatever you use it for. The story only gets you a little bit. And so we like to think that it's those partnerships that make us different. And it also, the really cool part about that is unlimited scalability. We've got projects in Nepal, we've got projects in India, in Tunisia, and now one we're working with in Honduras. And again, just partnering with like-minded people that see work as a way for transformation.
And I mean, I just want to hit on this. I talked to your partner Chris a couple of times,
Yeah.
And I feel like through all that, man, moving your family with 3 girls across the world, I'm sure there were some moments where you were kind of in a state of, I don't know, shock is the right word, but just kind of like shock and awe, maybe, and just. And
it was white knuckle for sure.
Yeah.
Like, what are we doing?
And so, just explain. I would personally just like to know. You mentioned an eternal kind of purpose for what you're doing, and what kind of faith did that take?
All of it, and then some. This whole thing for me is living out what I say I believe, right? And if I say I believe something on Sunday morning, or whenever you go to church, or you say something on the weekend, where does the rubber meet the road on Monday? Mm-hmm. Right? Like, am I all in or not? And so we were all in. I mean, literally 2 weeks before we get on the plane, we're in a rental house out in Oregon, and we've sold everything we own. Literally, our last couch was gone. And this is where it gets a little crazy. We get 2 phone calls. So I told you, my wife, she's got this medical condition. Every 6 weeks, she's got to go in for IVs for the rest of her life. It's what keeps her off the operating table. And so I got 2 calls that morning, and first one was my mom. My dad's best friend had pancreatic cancer, had been in a coma for 5 days. He was the first one to hold me the day I was born. And it was just, rough. Like, she just called to say, hey, today's the day. Bill's going home. And just want to let you know, we're going to try to see if we can have the funeral before you guys take off. But they give me that call. And the second one was my wife's doctor saying, if you go, you're going to kill your wife. Like, you can't get the medical care she needs on that side of the planet. We felt clearly we were supposed to go. Like, just everything seems to line up. And we just really heard, like, hey, this is where you're supposed to be. But here's the doctor saying, you're going to have to explain to your kids and your in-laws why you chasing your dream was more important than your wife living. I mean, just a punch in the junk. There's no other way to put it. And, what do you do? You're like, what decision did I make? I mean, as a dad and a husband, like, I put my wife's life at risk? Like, at what point are we crossing the line here for what we feel like we're supposed to do and living out our faith, right? So we just kind of dropped to our knees together, like we didn't know what to say or do, and just literally just as we dropped down, my mom calls. Not the time you want to talk to mom, right? Like, just love her to death. Not the time you want to talk to mom, and she, so I let it ring through, and 5 times she calls me, and on the 5th time I looked at my wife and said, look, she just needs to she needs to tell me that Bill's gone, and we're gonna let her do that. We'll explain this junk way later. We don't even know what we're gonna do. So I pick up the phone. My mom says, hey, I'll explain in a minute, but Bill wants to talk to you.
Wow.
I'm like, what? So she had left the room to go out and call us and everybody. And as they came back to the room, the alarms are going off. The nurses are paging the doctors and freaking out. Bill's ripped all the IVs and tubes out of him. He's bouncing on the end of his bed like a little kid, and the nurses are trying to get him to lay down. As my mom walks in, he's going, Judy, you need to call your son. And my mom's like backpedaling, like, what's going on? And she says, he says, well, you got to call Jeff. She's like, okay, what do you want me to tell him? He's like, no. Right now, you got to call him. And this is where it gets wild. So she puts him on the phone. I can't understand the guy. Like, he literally has just ripped everything out. He's in, there's alarms going off. Hands the phone back to my mom. And he whispers in her ear. He says, I was just with Jesus. And he said, go. Like, right in that moment. And I don't know where you're coming from. But when you need to hang on to something that literally you're making a decision that's going to put a family member at risk, but it's the right thing to do, you kind of need that thing to hang on to. So when you ask me the question, like what kind of faith does it take to do that? Like, I mean, more than I got.
Yeah.
Wow.
What a cool story.
Man, it's an awesome story, and one that we can say you've been blessed through it. I mean, I know it was obviously challenging, a lot of ups and downs through everything, and I could sit here and say I don't know if I could make that move.
Yeah.
And big
I don't know if I could do it twice.
Yeah.
But at the same time, I wouldn't go back and change it.
Yeah.
And obviously we survived it. My girls got an education.
And how long were you over there?
So the first time we went, we only made it 4 months because my wife was having to literally fly all the way back to Portland, Oregon, 48 hours airport to airport.
Wow.
Just to go get healthcare for 30 hours and then turn around and fly back. And that was going to kill her, if nothing else. So what we did is we brought the family back home, but then I would be home for 4 weeks and gone for 5, home for 4, gone for 5, and just rotating through that since we couldn't stay. We couldn't get the insurance money to cover her meds, even to fly her to Thailand, somewhere closer where we could get it. But it was $9,000 every time she sat in the seat, and no overseas insurance for it. So it kind of determined that we came back. But the good part of that is what happens is when you get stuck over there, it's really difficult to stay engaged. Like, we wouldn't be doing this from Nepal, right? Like, how do I stay engaged with my market and tell the story and do the sales and build the relationships from over there? So instead, that's really where we started to discover building boots on the ground relationships with people that are already there, like-minded, shared values, that are willing to help do that work. Really, we're just equipping them to do what they're going for. And so I now know dozens of families that have done the same thing, but they got to stay.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
That's super cool. Well, man, what a really amazing, you definitely just had to listen to the call of God on your family and say, we're going. This is what God's telling us to do. And it probably doesn't make sense to the rest of the world at all. But, a lot of stuff that God chooses to do tends to be that way. So I would love for us to transition, though, because this story is phenomenal. But you also don't have this great company if you don't make some really great products. And so you've got some really great stuff out there. And I would love you to just speak to some of these things. I know the first thing that actually ever drew me to the Zoe Angling Group was Fairflies and the the brushes that you guys create. We were talking about those a little while ago, and I heard them talked about, or was reading. I think I was reading something actually. I think on like a fly tying Facebook group or something like that. And somebody mentioned these brushes, and I'm like, brushes? Like, what are we brushing out dubbing? Like, what are we doing here? And then they did a post.
As the newbie tire, that's what I was like, what are we brushing?
Yeah, what are we brushing out? And then I looked into it and got to see
hair brushes.
Yeah, I know. And I was like, what are we doing? But then I started checking these things out, and they seem pretty next level, especially for tying some big flies.
Has Chris gotten any to you yet?
No, he hasn't got it yet.
You a care
but
package?
I have seen them and I've used them. So
okay,
yeah,
all right.
But no, we haven't had any sent our way yet. But maybe you can work on that.
We'll hook you up.
That'd be awesome.
So explain to everybody what this brush and how quick it makes it.
And
it does.
And I would love for you to explain the innovation behind it, like how you came up with this idea.
Yeah, well, again, just crazy downloads of ideas. So Ben Paul of OPST, Olympic Peninsula Skagit Tactics, company that's been around for a hot minute as well, and I were talking about doing these like really complex flies. So you got to understand, industry-wise, an elk hair caddis, an Adams, like that's a 4-minute fly. Like most of you guys, like that's a 30-minute fly. But if you're going to tie commercially, it's 10 dozen a day, 120 flies a day. You got to do that's 4 minutes a fly. That doesn't count breaks. Like, can you do it? Like,
what did you hold on? Let's stop right there. You said that what was a how long for an average tire?
An elk hair caddis is 4 minutes.
You got to be for able me. To what is the average for like me? You
like 20 to 30 minutes, like most guys. Sure. Like at
least. I've been tying for what are we 9 months? Almost a year. I guess we're almost to the year mark.
Yeah,
but it's still pretty rough. So 4 minutes,
and they've got to be perfect. Right? And the head's got to taper right to the eye, and like all the little QC things that we do on them. You can't grab the fly and twist it around the hook. It's got to be on there tight. And you got to do 10 dozen a day. And I usually challenge people, especially like if they'll come meet me in one of our tying groups, like, okay, today your goal is to see if you can tie 10 dozen of that one fly.
Wow.
Usually by lunch, people give up. They're like, forget this, right?
Yeah.
So these were taking 15 to 20 minutes for my commercial tires, like really complex stuff. And then you've got this other challenge of like, I'm in a place in the world where they've never gone fly fishing. Like the idea of proportion is what's pretty in each of their eyes. Not like it's the science of production is really difficult when you think about it, right? For somebody who has no context, what does that insect look like? Or what am I imitating? And so I wanted to come up with a way that we could shorten the time on those productions, those super complex flies, but B, make my proportions consistent, like measurably more consistent. And so, I've tied with EP brushes forever, but it takes like a whole stinking EP brush to tie a fly.
Yeah.
And it's typically just one material, maybe just a little bit of fleck of flash or something in there, but you're grabbing 5 or 6 of these brushes to work out a fly, and it's not really time saving. But then you have this other problem. Like I wanted to be able to put silicone legs and like 5 different materials into one brush. Like, how do I do it? And I'm literally driving up to meet with Ben Paul, and I just haven't figured it out yet. Because the main problem with like a brush is you got 2 pieces of wire, right? And you put some material between those 2 pieces of wire, and then you spin it. But when you cut that wire, all that extra material just pulls out. Our brushes don't do that. And the reason is, and it's just like this, like flash came into my head on the way up, like, I know how to do this. So we have super fine wire made for us. There's one machine in the world. It's made in France. They run it through this machine 3 times so that we have perfect consistency. That way it doesn't break in the middle of that brush, because they're all hand spun. Every one of our brushes are made by hand. And the key is every material gets its own layer between wires. So instead of 2 strands of heavier wire, it's 5 strands of super fine wire.
Wow.
Now when you cut it off, it almost welds that end. You can tie in crazy Charlies by just nicking it in, cutting it off, and you're done. You don't even have to take it around and tie it off. Extended bodies, tails, all that kind of stuff. And so it opened up kind of a world of new technique that we're able to do. Like, who else has silicone legs in their brushes?
That's pretty cool.
I need like a video demonstration. It went like over my head. I'm gonna have to see somebody use it. I mean, it sounds incredible. Just being the novice that I am, I just need to see it. But I know
you tie it in, you go once around, you tie it off, you're done. You get a dozen flies out of one brush.
That's impressive.
It's really cool. Really, really cool.
That is impressive. So that was like the first thing, correct? That was your first.
That was our first.
Yeah.
That was our first. Yeah.
Like your baby. That's your first.
It kind of opened up some doors for us. I mean, we've got those brushes on the shelves in Orvis. Like, how cool is that?
Yeah.
Right? Like,
that's gotta be
that's
neat.
when you kind of get to feel like you're part of the community.
Yeah.
You, like, made something that Orvis thinks we're selling.
Yeah. That's really cool. And it all goes back to I love that you call them like the 5D, like the 5D brush. And I was just kind of looking at those. Would you mind explaining that a little bit?
Well, we're kind of looking at, like, it's not just three-dimensional. Like, it's got all these dimensions. Like, I can geek out on the sciences. So, guys, we went way down the rabbit hole on this. And when I say way down the rabbit hole, I'm on the phone. Like, so all of our flashy and plastic stuff we use in flies, like all of our synthetics, really come from 3M, right? Like, they hold the patents on all mylars and acetates. So I'm literally on the phone. I find out how our mylars and acetates are dyed.
Oh, wow.
Because we're trying to dive into, like,
you're getting into some
colors.
really,
like, we went way
stuff,
down.
Yeah.
And we started figuring out, like, the companies were using flame underneath the tank to heat water. They would dump this stuff in there. And when you have flame, it's super hot on the bottom and not as hot on the top. So you're trying to keep it moving. And these super thin mylars and acetates, these little thin plastic flash pieces that we use are microns in thickness. So very heat sensitive. Right. And so we started getting into this, found out that they dump battery acid in it to open up the pores. They dump battery acid into the water and then toxic dyes to get the colors. I'm like, so I'm hiring people. We're getting them out of nasty situations, but I'm going to make them, handle a bunch of
nasty stuff. Yeah.
Right. Like that doesn't make sense. What else could we do? So we came up with a way to do a circular bath that doesn't use flame on our tanks. And that allowed me to control within a half a degree of temperature so that I could actually manage the plastic and what was going on literally at the molecular level in it. And then because we're able to do that, like your variables and everything are like time and temperature, right? Like, I didn't have to use battery acid and flush it down. By the way, this just goes into our water treatment plants. It just flushes out. We eliminated battery acid by using citric acid. Right? A totally natural product.
Totally fine to use. Yeah, totally fine to handle.
Cheap, easy to, easy. I mean, stick it on your finger. I think we put it in half of our, sour candies. It's safe, right? Like it's in our food. At least we hope it's safe. But so citric acid, and then worked with a dye company that had gotten an EPA certification, non-toxic dye. And I said, hey, will that work on mylars and acetates? They're like, no way. That'll never work. It's good for natural fibers only. I'm like, would you send me some to play with anyway? Turns out it works awesome.
That's great.
So like we're down like literally designing the angles of cuts. And so we're back to the 5D question here, right?
Yeah.
So if I want an all pink brush and all I do is I put one material in that brush, it all has the same flow rate in the water, right? Put it in moving water. And what that does is it causes it to mad back, and it might as well be a chunk of silicone back there. There's no movement to it, right? And what we're looking for is movement when we're putting, designing patterns. We're looking for profile, right? These are way more important than color. UV reflection, profile, and movement. That's what you're looking for. And so, what we'll do is we'll take 5 different pink materials, each one of them a different micron of thickness, a different angle of cut. So now I've got different rates in the water. They're going in and out. When those things get wet, they look like they're breathing.
Creating all kinds of movement. Wow. That's so cool. Jeff, this is just unreal to me because we've been sitting here having this awesome conversation of this really cool story. And then now we're like geeking out on micron plastics like this. I just find it fascinating. You don't usually see, at least in my own experience, and that's very limited, you'll usually see a guy who is super mindful about like taking care of people, but also like and I hope you take this as a compliment, like geeking out on like really like intricate things like cutting fibers, and I just really appreciate that about you.
So much fun.
Yeah, no, I mean I get into it. I love it. Like I'm sitting here geeking out with you, and we could probably go down on some crazy rabbit holes about all this stuff. Josh was over here going like, "Oh my gosh, what are these guys talking about?"
Well, I'm just a little bit lost, but Caleb will break it down for me in simple terms probably when we're done with this episode to explain what we actually just talked about.
We just need to get some lines wet. It'll all make sense.
Yeah, I think that sounds like a great idea.
It's very doable. You're close enough to us to make that happen.
So you created the 5D brushes. So they're handmade in your tying.
They are.
Tying groups like in Nepal and all these places.
We quit tying flies. Like,
okay, that's what I was going to ask. So you're not okay. Yeah, that's what I was about to ask.
We can create jobs doing this, right? And so, not only are there 5 materials and 5 strands in there, and we can add in silicone, which again, if you're using machines to make those things, you just can't pull that off.
Yeah.
But they're environmentally friendly, right? They're tougher. They're going to make faster flies and all that kind of stuff. So. We measure every material that goes into every brush to the 1,000th of an ounce.
Wow.
Right. So get this at kind of our biggest month we ever did was like 15,000 brushes that were there tying. How many do you think we had to fail? Now, let me give you the criteria. Has to be within a 1/4 inch, longer or shorter, of 12 inches, and it has to hit that 1,000th of an ounce mark. Across 5 materials.
I would assume it would be a lot, but I don't know.
5.
Wow, that's pretty great.
5 brushes out of 15,000.
And that's
it
being
just
done
building
by
processes.
Hand. Yeah, that's pretty incredible. I mean, that's not machine cut. That's somebody sitting there by hand coming through.
By hand.
Wow, that's really
incredible.
We
use nothing even electronic. We made custom tools that they sit there and they spin these things with.
Okay, so let's go that route because you got the brushes, and that's kind of Fairfly's thing, correct?
And now they have the fly fur.
That was it. And then we started designing materials.
Yeah,
you got the fur.
Start getting into the science of these things.
Yeah.
I went to a faux fur factory and retooled a $5 million faux fur factory to create our fly fur.
Wow.
Okay.
It's the longest, finest fiber that's ever been made, and it has the least amount of under fur. And we had to change how it shears and how it actually manufactures the fibers to get that. Like, that's how far down the rabbit hole we've gone on materials.
I love it.
Like,
that's what makes it so impressive. And that's pretty much what Fairflies does. And then you've got how many? You got 4 other companies.
4 other companies
under
now. Yeah.
So Angling Group.
We about 4 years ago. So Wasatch tools. I don't know if you've ever seen a Wasatch tool, but wood, gold-plated brass.
They're beautiful.
Like, highest quality tools ever. And as a tire, I always drooled on them, but could never afford a set. And turns out we lived, a few miles away from the guy who owned Wasatch Tools. He was the 3rd owner of the company. It's a 50-year-old company. Started out in a guy's garage, Mr. Childs, and he started out making these tools on his little lathe for his tying team. And then it kind of grew, but it never really went to production. It just was small batch stuff done in their garages. Well, he came to me and says, "Hey, I'm ready to retire. I love what you're doing. Listen, I want to give you the company. Will you take it over?"
Wow.
For me. And does that mean I finally get a set of Wasatch tools? Sure, I'll do it.
I'll take the company just for
I'll take the company just for a set. And he, Bob had been just incredibly generous to us. He outfitted all of our tires. Actually, our first tying team was all Wasatch tools, and Regal's been incredibly great to us. They've outfitted our tires. It's again community, right? Like, you think you read these brands, but you forget there's like people that started them in their garages, and they're really cool people that really figured something out, and it's just cool to be able to call them friends now. But so Wasatch, we took over about 4 years ago, and today we brought in 9 CNC machines. Matter of fact, I was running a forklift most of the day today, throwing on my Carhartts, running a forklift, unloading like the semi full of 9 monster CNC machines into a new shop. We're bringing Wasatch home and completely redesigned it. So we've improved on the product, bigger, handles to fit better in the hand. You don't have to hold your little finger out when you're working with a tying tool anymore. And we put like bearings in things that should rotate instead of just having them rotate down the middle. Like, we're taking them next level, and we just brought all the machines in house. We're going to start to 100% produce Wasatch tools as our only in-house production line, because in the middle of all that, we're launching a new fly tying vise that is like nothing else on the market. It's truly on axis. It spins like a sewing machine. And you guys have to come on over to Chattanooga to get to see it. It's
sounds like we may be making a trip.
Chattanooga.
Yeah,
I think you need to come over. Wait till you see my tying wall.
I bet. That's awesome. And then you've you guys have picked up a few other brands here lately as well.
We launched Pivot this past year. The fly market's awesome. We love it. It's my passion, but obviously conventional fishing is larger. We spent about 5 years figuring out how to replace lead in like rooster tails and jigs and that kind of stuff with, again, a non-toxic solution. We're leaving about 4,000, I think the last study I read, 4,300 tons a year are left in our waterways of lead just by sport anglers. And we know that by how much is purchased on an annual basis in the U.S. That's just U.S. number, not global. That's a lot of lead that we're leaving in our waterways. It does leach. I don't care what anybody says. Like, the science shows it leaches. So we're putting lead out there like that. How do we do it? And again, back to our team. If I'm going to have somebody produce this, I want to take them out of a bad situation and make them go handle lead all day. So we came up with a way of doing lead with a plastic, a high density polyethylene plastic. Here I go geeking on the sciences again. That is super thin, but it now it can't chip. Bismuth is a key ingredient, Pepto-Bismol. So we just had to increase the size by 10%. It's almost imperceptible by the eye. And we're doing the whole line of anything leaded, and we're applying our brushes as the material behind them. So instead of just running bucktail behind a jig head, put our 5D brushes back there and see what happens.
Nice. Yeah, makes a lot of sense.
So that's Pivot. Pivot's kind of literally, it's our pivot into the conventional market for a bit. And then Stealth, we recently, were contacted by the guys that founded Stealth Hooks. They're genius. The innovation's great, but they were moving on to something else. And they're like, hey, Jeff, if anybody's going to take a hook in a different direction, it's you. Would you just take this and run with it? And so Stealth has been pretty new. And then our next one that's coming out, we've talked about it a little bit, but we're full launch this year at ICAST, is a composite. So our Tunisia team does composites. So we're doing a special carbon fiber and fiberglass composite tackle boxes with inserts that magnetically pop in and out. So like you can have a cigar tube and a flask on one side and your dry flies on the other.
I like it.
Now we're talking. This is something we got to see here.
So we're playing with composites and we're seeing how far we can take that. And we've got a lot of really cool ideas. From a angler's tomahawk all the way out to a cooler, your 45-liter cooler that weighs 27.5 pounds. Ours weighs 5.5.
Wow. Okay.
So some fun stuff. Again,
I was going to say, this
is like we're talking
to a fishing lane. If it will sell to an angler and we can create jobs doing it.
Yeah, that's the
let's
cool
play.
Thing. I love it. I think that's incredible. And I don't know. I just find this so refreshing. Like, you're finding ways. I mean, obviously, it's a market. You're making money doing it, but you're helping change lives. I mean, like you're doing this the right way, which I think is just so. Like I say, it's just refreshing. Like, it's neat to hear someone who's like can geek out about all the crazy things about fly fishing and all the crazy things about tying flies and the super, intricacies of all the synthetics and all that stuff. But then at the same time, knowing the back end of that, like there's purpose behind it all. And I think that's really great.
What gets you up in the morning?
Yeah.
Right? Like, because building any company, I don't care what it is, it's a fight. It's tough. You're coming in, you're underfunded, you've got big competitors and a couple ideas.
Yeah.
Right? Like,
for sure.
What gives me the right to bring something new to the fishing market? Like, I'm just another angler. But when you get a purpose like that behind it, like that gets you up in the morning and you go a little longer, I think.
Well, I got to think too, and I don't want to speak for you, but I feel like as you're designing these products and as you're creating these things, these people that you're helping are in the back of your mind.
I know every one of them by name.
Wow.
They're not in the back of my mind. They're in the front of my mind. It's hard to go to sleep at night.
Yeah.
That's the messy side.
Yeah.
Knowing what I know and experiencing what I've experienced and seeing what I've seen, like, what else can we do? Who's coming along? I want 100 more companies with the same goal of creating 10,000 jobs. Let's use our industry to make a difference instead of just doing the same old thing. Or, ASA came out and said 92% of the fishing market in the U.S. comes out of China. Like, look, that's not really benefiting anybody except for us.
Mm-hmm.
What can we do different? And we can. The margins are there. The numbers are there. Our market's fine. Went up 30% over COVID, not down.
Yeah,
right?
I'm sure. Yeah.
Better being in a fishing company than a restaurant.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah, to me, the whole thing is why don't we all just do this? Imagine what we could say, even just as the fly fishing community. Imagine what we could change or what we could affect. Just everybody going this way at it.
Jeff, I'm just blown away, and thank you for who you are, number one, and for what you're doing to impact the lives of these people and your companies. We're going to take just a real quick break, but we do want to come back after this break and give you a chance to talk about being a dad on the fly, and your three girls, give you a chance to talk about that experience and how much your girls mean to you and your family. We've already heard about your wife and how amazing, obviously, she is to have gone through what she's gone through and still be right there with you. So we're going to take a quick break. We'll be right back to do that. So we're back with Mr. Jeff Coffey, founder of Zag. Say it again, Caleb. Zag Angling Group, correct?
It's Zoe Angling Group. They call it Zag.
But yeah. Okay, so I got to tell you.
Zoe Angling
why
Group.
Zoe?
Zag.
Why Zoe?
Yeah, let's hear it.
It's the Greek word translated in the New Testament actually as the life God intended,
Wow.
or just secularly, defined, as a whole life. Is the other definition. So, given what we're doing, as we started to grow, and like Fair Flies doesn't sell products into the conventional market, like nobody's buying a Fair Flies jig. It just doesn't make sense. That's really kind of why we developed the other brands or product lines. We kind of needed to come with like a holding company name, and that's just always kind of held close for me. Is that whole life concept for people who didn't have a whole life.
Man, it's
really cool, man. Love that. So, Jeff, you've been telling us so many great stories and all about your awesome products and the story behind why you've created this angling group. You told the story about moving to overseas, all these crazy places. You also told us you had 3 daughters.
Yeah.
So tell us a little bit, what was that like? Not only just taking you and your wife, but taking your entire family, saying yes to what you felt like God told you to do, and having them go along for the journey.
Awesome. And a word, white knuckle is also like, just there's nothing to relate. Like when you're there, the first thing that hit me was the light switches go down to turn the lights on.
Okay.
Like you don't think about it,
Yeah.
but you walk into a room and your hand always goes up to flip the light on. But in India and in most of Asia, it's down. So literally, if you fly over the top of Kathmandu, you're already on your way back home. You cannot go further on the planet without leaving the planet than Kathmandu. And here we're landing, and I've got 3 daughters in an area where I know human trafficking is a big deal. So my girls at the time were 17, 15, and 3.
Wow.
So I had mentioned that my wife had that surgery. 3 months later, we find out we're pregnant.
Wow.
Like, crazy story. doctor says your wife's not healthy enough to carry the meds that she's on, like nobody's been pregnant on. We've scheduled a termination for you this afternoon. And we looked at him and said, hey, we just don't believe that that's our choice. Like literally, if God didn't take her on the operating table, but this is how he does it. It's just that's just not. I don't think that's supposed to be in our control. And so we wrote it out, and we now have a 10-year-old, happy, healthy, beautiful girl named Gracie Hope, and couldn't decide what she meant more to us at the moment, right?
That's awesome.
And so she's 3 years old. We're loading on a plane to get there. We've got like 17 North Face duffel bags of materials and hooks, and we each get like this little like shoe, gym bag size bag to move
for all your stuff. You get a gym bag for all your stuff.
Girls, I'm just going to buy you clothes when we get there. Grab your underwear. Let's go. So we did, and we just showed up sight unseen and got lost our first day in Kathmandu. And as a dad, you're the protector, right? Like I'm like trying to bring my girls in and like have my hands on them at all times as we're trying to navigate what to us was just complete insanity and just chaos. There's just you learn the order as you're there, but culturally it's so different. It just everything feels like chaos. Now I know the rhythm, right? But then we didn't. And so yeah, I mean, gosh, as a dad, getting to give my kids that kind of experience, I mean, it changed them. I mean, in some ways for hard, like one of our girls, she had to get counseling when she got back because we had her interview our initial staff to tell their life story. So broadcast media is her major. She's graduating in May from Biola with a double major in honors English, Torrey honors English and broadcast media. So we said, hey, this is your chance. Like you've got this blog. I had no idea what she was going to hear. Like I wasn't even ready. She had secondary PTS from the stories that she heard. And that's the hard part. That's the messy part. But at the same time, it's shaped her whole life. She's like, now I want to know how to tell story. I want to know how to handle this. I want to know how to help people and get this out. And so, yeah, crazy, but crazy good.
Yeah.
And remember I said our 3 values were something that we could do together as a family. All 3 of my girls, even the 10-year-old, this might sound like child labor, but she's got a job in the company. And I'm a proponent of child labor, especially when they're your kid. Kind of sounds a little backwards to everything else we're talking about.
As long as it's your kid.
As long as it's your child.
As long as it's your child. Yeah.
As long as it's yours.
Yeah.
Right? No, it was something that we could all jump in and lift together. My girls have done like all of our social media over the years and learned how to write and learned, done their internships with us through college. And now Gracie growing up, she's got her own office in our offices.
That's awesome.
And like the team went in and helped her paint her office with like chalk paint, and she's super artistic. So she gets to like do a different chalk drawing every week in her office and stuff. But she's part of the team because we say we're building a family.
Yeah.
And honestly, we talked about what we do more in terms of church, to be honest, like showing up at work. Not everybody shares the same faith, as the same walk, has the same values, except that we do have aligned values, and therefore that's why we work together. But I'm always telling my team, hey, this is more church than anything you'll ever walk into on a Sunday morning, right? Because we're living stuff out and we're deciding together what we believe and what we're going to do about it. And so it's really cool to get to have my kids in that environment. And so the whole team, Gracie's just a little sister. And they're like, hey, Gracie, we got this idea. What do you think about this? Or what would you do? And she like gets in with the creative team and just comes up with ideas. And man, it's awesome.
That's gotta be incredible to experience that cool with your kids.
My wife does the books and administration stuff. And we're just in it. We're all in.
That's really neat. Now, do your kids, are they involved in the fishing side of all of this as well?
Yeah, I've tried. So my oldest, for when she was younger, she loved going out with me. But more, it was like, she didn't really care if she was fishing. It was just a day with dad.
Yeah.
I'm okay with that.
Yeah, absolutely.
For sure. My middle daughter, zero interest whatsoever. but loved being part of the storytelling.
Yeah.
Like she loved that part of what we're doing. And so the fishing wasn't her job, but the story was. And Gracie is way more like, Dad, I want to get this. I want to be the daughter that got fishing. And
That's cool.
she hasn't gotten her first fish yet, but we're working on it. We literally bought a house on Lake Chickamauga here in Tennessee, so we got like our own boat launch, and our goal is this year. This year she gets her first fish. So
I love it. So, what would you say to our anglers that are listening to the show and to the dads? You were able to take your family and immerse them in what you're doing. And everybody doesn't have that situation. We understand that for
Not
sure.
everybody.
Everybody has that.
Yep.
But to make them a part of something you did, for you, it was your business. It was your lively. Like it was your whole, everybody was together.
Yeah.
But what about for us that maybe are spending just a weekend or maybe spending just an afternoon, like you said, or a time to be outside with your kids? And what does that mean? What is your tips to make those experiences enjoyable?
Great question. I would say the biggest transition for me was becoming a guide. The reason I say that is because fishing wasn't just about me catching a fish anymore. It was about me helping somebody else have that experience. Right. And so I literally you put me in a drift boat, I'd rather be on the sticks and in the bow because I'm helping and I'm putting you over and I'm telling you where to put it. And half the time I'm setting the hook with the oars. You just don't know it yet. Like I'm seeing that fish belly up before you said it. And I say that, in relation to your question, because I think that often we get caught in the trap of when I go fishing, that's the me time. And it's important to have that. Like I think as us guys, like we need that connection to nature, to creation, that quiet away from the rest of crazy. But when you go with your family, like you gotta find a way for that not to be the me time, but to be the they time.
Yeah.
And really focus in on them. If you do that, the time's rich because now it's just what I love about fishing. Everybody that says, "Oh yeah, my grandpa, my dad, my next door neighbor's dad," like there's a connective tissue. There is a community aspect. Anytime you talk to anybody about fishing, it's powerful. It's a really cool. Not how many other sports are like that.
Yeah, that's what's drawn us into it so much, and
Right.
especially through our podcast and being able to talk to people like yourself. It is neat, the community that we have got to experience. Some of the most passionate people that I've ever met are anglers, and so it's been really neat to experience that as well.
As a dad, if you can teach your kids, like not yelling at them, not getting frustrated. It's temptation, right? It's tough. Like,
Oh, yeah.
Listen, if we're talking about our wives here, hire a guide. Like, just don't even try that. Like,
It's just better.
either that or be okay with the fact that she wants to be in the hammock with a book, and like that's good. Like, and that's kind of my wife. Like, she's like, I love being on the boat, but on the fish thing, I like eating the fish you catch. Like, bring some home.
Yeah.
But again, if we can really leverage our passion for what this is to teach our kids something, anything, and build that relationship, that's there for life.
Yeah. Couldn't agree more. Well, Jeff, this has been phenomenal. Joshua, anything before we kind of wrap up this conversation?
No, I feel like we could have Jeff on at least 3 more times just for me to dig into half of it. And I feel like we probably should have done justice better to break this up into 2 parts, but we'll definitely have you on again for the show to just maybe go down a different line of all kinds of things. We didn't even get to talk about his fishing that much. I was going to ask, do you ever get to fish anymore with all you're doing?
Not as much as I used to. It seems like, every time I get to go fishing, there's got to be a camera involved anymore, which like to me, like fishing it's spiritual for me.
Mm-hmm.
Like that's my time I connect with God. Like is when I need connection time, I'm on the water. But this year I'll be back. The moving the company and the family from the Northwest to the Southeast, really took a lot out. But like I got to catch my first permit last year.
Nice.
That was pretty cool. Like us salmon, trout, and steelhead guys, like all we know is salmon, trout, and steelhead. Like we don't think about terms of bonefish, tarpon, permit. Like now that I'm here, I can't get redfish off my mind. So much fun.
We feel you there.
Yeah, I get out.
I haven't even touched one, and I can't get them off my mind. I mean, that's how bad. Just reading and watching videos, and I can't even. Golly, we've got some opportunities this year. We're going to be doing that, but man, well, we're happy to have you down here in the Southeast. We're really not that far apart, so we're definitely going to have to get together at some point, and just you can explain and show us how all these wonderful things work, and also just a day on the water would be such an awesome experience.
Let's
Jeff,
go fish Charleston.
Let's do it. Pick us up on the way.
Let's go pound some reds there.
There you go.
That would be fun.
Let's make sure we tell everybody before we get off this episode the best way to find out and to support all you guys are about.
Sure. So all of our stuff is on zag.fish. That's zag.fish. No .com. .fish is the tilde. Our story's there. You can read more about who we are, what we do, or different products and product lines, and then retailers and places that you can find those products.
That's great. And if they want to follow along on social media, I'm sure you're on all those places as well.
We've got, I don't know, like 5 different social media channels and this and that. Like, you're going to have to ask Chris on those things.
I was going to say, we'll get Chris to, or maybe we should you should probably ask your daughter. She'd probably know better than you.
We're on Instagram. Like, we've got Fair Flies on Instagram. We got Pivot. Pivit, by the way, not OT.
Yep, I like it.
Not just because I'm not good at spelling. But,
that's great. We'll make sure to link to a lot of those places so people can check you guys out. Jeff, thank you. This has been enlightening. This has been just, I love hearing stories like this. And it's cool to see stuff taking place like this amongst the fly fishing community. And so I can't thank you enough for your time.
Thank you guys. Appreciate you both and what you're doing.
Well, thanks, Jeff. And thanks everyone for listening to this episode of the Dads on the Fly podcast. And until next time, tight lines.